Welcome to Pivoting, stories of patients transforming from cancer patients into something purposeful and joyful. My name is Erica Hansen Brown, and I'm the founder of One Cancer Place, and we are the originators for the Pivoting program. Let me introduce you all with great warmth to our next guest, Kathy Baker. So Kathy, I'm just going to turn it over to you to share with us your story, your thoughts, telling us your story. You're showing us how we can do it ourselves. So Kathy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Erica. I don't know what it is about advocacy and cancer advocacy in particular that it takes a cancer diagnosis to get us there. I've really been intrigued by that thought because I should have been in that position anyway with a family full of cancer, but I was not. It was when I was personally affected that all of a sudden I had my bully pulpit and was ready to start advocating for others as well as for myself. So anyway, just an interesting thought as we get started, but I mentioned it already just now. I come from a family that has a lot of cancer in the history, in our family history. And I was not worried though. I didn't see any reason to worry. Even when my sister at age 32 was diagnosed with breast cancer, and her oncologist immediately said, your sisters need to start getting tested. They need to start with their mammograms. I was immediately had the feeling of, I'm not going to live in fear of cancer. And I was not even interested in having a mammogram. I was 30 at the time. She's 2 years older than I am. And I thought, well, if it ever is convenient for me to have a mammogram, I will do it. And I was one of those returning students. I went back to school and went to law school when I was in my early 30s. And there was a mammogram bus that came to the school. I know it wasn't directed at the students, because, the students are young and they were not needing mammograms, but for staff, professors, whoever it was for, I was able to get a mammogram and it was clear. And there was my justification to no longer worry about it. I've had my mammogram. I'm fine. And at the time, I believe the guidelines were 50 years old for your mammogram. So I thought, I think I was 32 at the time, that I'll wait until I'm 50 and I'll have my next mammogram. Back to the family history, though, my sister was not the first. She was the first in our immediate family to have cancer, but my grandfather had died of cancer. My mom's dad had died of a very aggressive prostate cancer that was diagnosed in his 50s. And then his mother had died of pancreatic cancer. I had an uncle who had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. An uncle who had been diagnosed with colon cancer at a young age. And later in life, another uncle who was diagnosed with prostate cancer. So, we did have cancer. And there's not even, I'm sure there's others out there that we don't even know about. But when I can remember my law school graduation, there's a picture of 10 of us at that graduation. And at the time that I graduated, my sister was the only one in that group of 10 who had ever had cancer. My mom had not had cancer at that point. I had not had cancer. But fast forward just a year, and my mother was diagnosed with the first of 3 primary cancers. And it was a game changer. She began her treatment. The things that she was having, though, were more what we thought were lifestyle related cancers, because she had her first cancer was a bladder cancer. Well, she'd smoked. And we know that those carcinogens are sitting in our urine, just causing all sorts of havoc. So that was not a surprise, but she lost her bladder to bladder cancer. And her next cancer was lung cancer. Well, again, she was a smoker. up until the day that they removed part of one of her lobes of her lung, and that was the last time she ever smoked. And after that surgery, she never wanted to smoke again. The third cancer was a DCIS, breast cancer. So there was a breast cancer that kind of fit with the history of the prostate cancer and the pancreatic cancer. Well, fast forward 4 years from the time that I graduated, my sister, even though she had had stage 3B breast cancer at age 32, she was in good shape. She had beat cancer. It had been very tough, but she had beat her cancer. She was living a great life, 3 kids, husband, everything was going well. When mother was diagnosed with cancer, mother and dad had moved to East Texas to be close to my sister to help with her care. So what ended up happening was, mom gets her cancer. Well, when I'm coming home and I see, I need to be by my family. At this point, mother has cancer. I need to be close to my family. We ended up moving to East Texas as well. So we ended up in a small town, and was not what I ever planned, but that was kind of the seal on the deal of not wanting to practice law, not wanting to be in a situation where I was dealing with everyone's misery, their criminal law, their divorces in a small town. So that's kind of was one of the reasons I decided to go the oil and gas route with my career. Well, 4 years after the time that I was diagnosed, after I graduated from law school, I was at the doctor. He was doing a breast exam, and there was a lump. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I was not doing self-exams. We didn't hear all of that stuff this was in 2000. We didn't hear a lot about self-exams at that time. We didn't hear, we weren't being pushed like we are now for taking care of ourselves and being proactive in our own health. And, but my doctor was very concerned and somehow got me into a mammogram immediately. And that never happens either. And I went in for my mammogram. I was by myself. It was not long before the radiologist called me back, and he said, we want to do a needle biopsy today. So all of this in the matter of a day. And so it was kind of a shocking thing. I still was not thinking, I still was not expecting to have breast cancer, but he knew, he said by the shape of the tumor. Anyway, needle biopsy results were back in 2 days. I got a phone call at work, and sure enough, breast cancer. And my first thought was, I want rid of it. I don't care about going to see an oncologist. My mom had a great oncologist, but I don't even care about that. I just want to go and have the cancer gone, and then we'll deal with everything else afterwards. And this, again, 2000. And at that point, it's not like it is now. Probably now you would be discouraged from doing that. You would be, someone would talk to you about the importance of genetic testing to see, especially with a family history like mine. But that was not part of the discussion. So I went forward with a lumpectomy. And a friend of mine was the surgeon, actually. I'd known him since I was a child. And he did these routinely. He did mine. And when he went in for my lumpectomy, he saw that I had more than one tumor. I had a second tumor with a second type of cancer. So very unexpected. But again, I had large breasts, and it was not a matter of needing to have a mastectomy at that point because he had clear margins. Everything seemed fine. When we got the pathology back, it was stage 2B breast cancer, which meant that I was going to need chemo and radiation. At this point, I believe somewhere along at this point, I had seen an oncologist at this point, and he was suggesting that I consider genetic testing. Again, we had the family history. My sister, age 32. I was age 42. My mother had had 3 primary cancers. Her dad, prostate cancer at a young age. My great-grandmother had had pancreatic cancer. So, yeah, we might have looked like a poster family for some type of a genetic mutation, but this was early. This was 2000. They had only been doing BRCA testing for 4 years at this point. This was before the Angelina Jolie effect. This was something that it was just nothing that I was interested in doing. When my oncologist suggested it, I'm like, you want my DNA? I looked at him like he had horns. I mean, you need my DNA for what? There were privacy concerns. I mean, you just don't know. So I was, no, let's go forward with treatment. And he left it alone for a while. I went through all of the fun stuff. I had that fun adriamycin, the Red Devil, the favorite of all chemos, or one of the favorites, and other chemos as well. I did 30 days of radiation. And after about a year, I was cancer-free. Got to ring the bell. But that year had been devastating. It's easy to say, you can talk about having had cancer. All of us can do that. I think, all of us can. And we can say it in about 2 sentences and give short shrift to what we went through those diagnoses and through that treatment. But it was devastating. My family was impacted immensely. I was working. My income was gone because I couldn't work during that time. My husband had lost his mother to cancer when he was young. It was devastating to him. One of my kids was throwing up at school every day, and I had no clue what he was going through. It was no one at school told us. Well, I was the school board president, so you can imagine how unhappy I was with that, to learn that we weren't informing our parents when stuff like that was going on. But anyway, the point is that my life was disrupted. And I think about it to this day, every day when I'm drawing on my eyebrows or trying to put some eyelashes, make eyelashes where there are very few. I'm forever impacted by cancer in so many different ways. And I bring all of that up to say, when my oncologist started asking me, once I was through treatment, once again, he started asking me, and again, this is back when there weren't PARP inhibitors. So knowing if I had had a BRCA mutation would not have affected my treatment in any way. But he still wanted to know and to see what else I might be at risk for. But again, going at that point, once I finished treatment and as I was going back for my follow-up visits, he would always ask me, are you ready to consider genetic testing? And I'd tell him, I've not thought about it, but I will. But I never did because I didn't want to do it. I wanted cancer in my rearview mirror. I did not want to think about it anymore. I was one and done. That's just how I viewed it. And this is kind of crazy. For 9 years, at every visit, my oncologist asked, have you given any more thought to genetic testing? And we've gone past the Angelina Jolie bump at this point. And so I've heard about it. I know more about it, and I'm not uneducated, but I still thought that there was really no reason for me to worry about it. I've had my cancer. So fast forward to 2009, and Myriad was the only company doing the genetic testing at that point, of course. And there was a rep for Myriad who came to see my oncologist, and he shared with him a study. Studies are important. We're all learning this. Studies are very important. It impacted my life. It saved my life, truly. The study was called the Metcalf study. It was a doctor I believe she was out of Canada, and she was looking at BRCA patients who had either a BRCA1 or a BRCA2 mutation. And she wanted to see, and that had all had early breast cancer, which they were classifying as either stage 1 or stage 2. And I was stage 2B. And what they were looking at was to see what was the likelihood that these women with otherwise great prognoses, what was the likelihood that they're going to go on and get ovarian cancer? because they had determined that with a BRCA2 mutation, you basically had, well, the study showed that with a BRCA2 mutation, you had a 1 in 7 chance. This person has a 1 in 7 chance of going on to get ovarian cancer. And a BRCA1 mutation has a 1 in 3 chance. Well, that's pretty high. So my oncologist, on my next visit, he has more urgency. My mother is also dying, she's his patient. And I'm sure he always wondered about me because my mother was the most compliant patient in the world. And we shared him as our oncologist. And I was the most not compliant. I was not a compliant patient, obviously, with not doing the testing. Challenging everything from tamoxifen or this, I just was always asking questions and not always following what was recommended. But he says, your family looks like a mutation and you need to know. Mom was dying at the time, and my sister was also under his care, just preventive care. And together we decided that we would do testing. And we both it was discovered that we both shared a BRCA1 mutation. So knowing that, mother never tested, but we knew it came through her. There was 0 cancer on my dad's side. And sometimes I'll talk to a genetic counselor and she'll say, well, you really don't know. And I agree, you don't know without that test. However, when I gave her the family history of the types of cancers and going back a couple of generations, she said, yeah, you're right. It did come from your mother's side. Well, anyway, so when I did the testing, I learned at that point that I really had a high chance of having ovarian cancer. And I still had my breast. I still had my breast tissue. So I needed to have a lumpectomy. I had like a 87% chance that I was going to have breast cancer again. Didn't want to do that. So I knew I needed to have risk-reducing surgeries. And they don't call them preventive now. They call them risk-reducing because you still have a risk of having cancers even after removal of these body parts. So we looked at it and I said, Mom's dying. I am not going to do it right now. I'm going to wait until Mom has died because we knew that was coming. And 5 months later, she had passed. And I had promised her that I would have those surgeries, and I did. So I was self-employed. And so I found, I said, the only way I'm going to do it is I have it all done at once because I can't take off work several times, for this extended recovery. So I need to find surgeons who will work together and do all of my surgeries at once, which was not easy because it's not recommended for a reason. But I found 3 surgeons who worked together. I had a double mastectomy followed by reconstruction of both breasts, followed by a complete hysterectomy. And because we were in there and having so much fun and it was just going to be a fun surgery, I also had the plastic surgeon come back and do a tummy tuck. Why not? When they did my surgery, 10 hours of surgery, it turned out that I had early ovarian cancer. Had I not had my genetic testing when I did, had I not had this risk-reducing surgery, I have 0 doubt that I would not be here. I am not someone who goes to the doctor. And the vague symptoms of ovarian cancer, of bloating, okay, what woman doesn't have bloating, right? Feeling full when you're eating, I thought that was the goal of eating, is to get full. So, all of the vague symptoms, I know that I never would have gone to the doctor. Again, I'm not the compliant patient. I don't go to the doctor unless, women are like that. We're strong and we have lots of things going on and we just don't have time to go to the doctor. I'm always telling men that, I think y'all are babies, but that's another story. Anyway, so I went learning that I had early ovarian cancer through my genetic testing and through my risk-reducing surgery saved my life. I have 0 doubt. I didn't dodge the bullet in that I had to go through chemo again, but another year down the road, I was cancer-free. And that was in 2010. And 13 years ago, I will am almost at my 13-year anniversary of when I was cancer-free again. And that doesn't happen a lot with ovarian cancer, as we know. They call it the disease that whispers, the cancer that whispers, or the silent killer. There are several cancers that are no symptoms until they're advanced and difficult to beat. So anyway, all of that to say, I was cancer-free and credited it to genetic testing at that point. And I'm going to backtrack just a little bit about advocacy, because right after my breast cancer advocacy, I jumped on board and became an advocate. Right after my breast cancer diagnosis, I jumped on board to become an advocate. Within 2 years, I was chairing Relays for Life for American Cancer Society. I've chaired 4 of those in 2 different counties. I was on different boards. I was the president of the cancer board in the community, the larger community near us that had 4 cancer centers. And I was on doing advocacy work in Washington, calls on Congress. I was doing all sorts of things to try to make an impact. But always the thing that was most important to me was patients. And I always made sure one of my favorite things to ever do was to be the patient sponsor of events for patients in all of these organizations, because patients need support. And so with the American Cancer Society, I had that opportunity. And then working with Suzanne Lindley at Say Yes to Hope, I've had that opportunity. In other organizations, I've done that. But primarily my work has been, at this point, had been through American Cancer Society. And in fact, in 2007, I believe, I was named what then was called Hero of Hope, and now we're called National Voices of Hope. And we share our stories across the country, our survivorship stories and our encouragements to others. So all of this time, for many years, I had many different positions in patient advocacy as I was going through. But I love the name of this this series of talks that we're having about pivoting, because I did have my pivot moment. I had been following so many organizations and learning as much as I could about hereditary cancer and about genetics, but I have zero scientific background, none, just a passion. And that's where I was coming from. And I was seeing that there were so many people with a need that was not being met. They were getting education from fabulous organizations like FORCE and different hereditary cancer specific organizations, Alive and Kicking. There are many, the stomach cancer organizations. They were getting great information, but no one was helping those people who had no access. And so that was a concern for me. So my pivot point was the beginning of the pandemic. There was no longer any call for oil and gas title work that I'd been doing for many years. And we had a pause. And so I thought, this is the time to start my foundation. So I was talking with Suzanne, my dear friend, and I said, what do I call my organization? I said, what do you call when you're just talking about your old faulty gene? And she said, that's it. So Suzanne gave me my name of our organization through a brainstorming moment. And so we became My Faulty Gene. And yes, it was based on the fact that I had a faulty gene, and I wanted to help other people learn if they had it as well. So, and you're welcome to jump in before I really get into start talking about My Faulty Gene and what we do. If you have any questions, anyone?
Well, I want to give you a quick little break here and just tell you how thrilled I am that you and Suzanne, to sit down and figure out a name for your organization, because it is great. And naming, as you know, I believe is everything. So I think I really applaud this name. And tell us more.
Okay.
I'm going to develop a couple of questions that I may throw in, and I may not, because you seem to be covering it beautifully, Kathy. letting us know who you are and what makes you up and inspiring us to do our own thing as well. So thank you much for doing this. So have at the next piece.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Y'all are probably too young. Maybe a couple of us are not, but there was a doll called Chatty Cathy. And I had one, and I don't know if they named it after me or I was named after it, but I've really taken that Chatty Cathy title to heart. So I love to talk. So I don't usually spend as much time talking about my background, but I think it helps to understand. And there was one other thing that I didn't mention as far as I did mention the tummy tuck, but I didn't mention one of the other problems I had through my cancer treatment from my breast cancer. And that was that in a period of 18 months from the time of my diagnosis with breast cancer, I doubled my weight. I doubled my weight. So you can imagine I was 300 pounds. I was not happy. It happened fast, the steroids, and I was out of control. It was a bad point. So when we talk about the things that we go through and patients go through, they don't talk about things like that a lot of time and don't own up to having faced something like that. But it was not nice. It was not fun. It was not pretty. So when I said I had the tummy tuck, I mean, it didn't take me long to realize I was not going to live like that. I couldn't live like that. And within 2 years, I had gastric bypass surgery to help me get my weight off because I was starting to have health issues and I was not going to do that. So when the tummy tuck time, that was great. It was great. I've always struggled with my weight. That's not a question. I mean, but never had the problem like I did during that time from cancer. Okay, so got that out of the way. That may be something you want to edit. I don't know. But it's just once I started when I realized that I wanted to start the foundation and we came up with a name, I'm going to jump ahead just a little and say this last year at the ASCO GI meeting in San Francisco, I had a doctor come up to me and look at that name and he said, I hate that name. Why in the world would you have named your organization? That is just, I think, and he just kept walking around and just, he was hilarious. So thank you, Erica, that you think it was an okay choice for a name. I mean, I've been happy with it all along, but this one man sure didn't like it. But that's what we're talking about. I mean, all of us have two genes. All of us have a set of BRCA1 genes. I have one that I got from my mom. I have one that I got from my dad. One of mine was faulty, not both, just one of them was. That's with every gene, and every gene is in every cell of our body. This is something that a friend of mine who's an oncologist, he calls it mom and pop cancer, or when you have a gene, when you have a mutation that's in when they do genetic testing and they find a mutation, it's not just in one place. Like when you're doing somatic testing of a tumor and you may find, you may find a BRCA mutation in there, but this is in every cell of my body. Every place that gene is located, which is in every cell, every one of them is messed up. Every one of them is faulty. So, I have lots of faulty genes. So, as it turns out. So anyway, when I decided to start the foundation, I had experience. I had great experience in running lots of organizations locally for the American Cancer Society. I'd chaired many big events. I'd actually raised several $1 million for them. So I could handle that for them. But when you're trying to do something for an organization that no one knows anything about, it's not the same. You don't have that name recognition. But I went ahead and thought, what do I do? So I just started it at ground zero. I have to learn more about this. But my ultimate goal was to get to the place where we could provide funding for patients that needed testing that would otherwise not be able to have testing. And there's lots of concerns that are associated with that. For instance, if you get them testing and they don't have funds for that testing, how in the world are they going to see a doctor? Who's going to follow that? Who's going to follow up with them? So, and we'll talk about that some, because there's many questions, but I just didn't want I didn't want funding or lack thereof to be the reason that somebody didn't test. And I didn't see anybody that was meeting that need. So that was my idea in founding My Faulty Gene. I wanted to educate people about it. Obviously, that's part of it. But I also wanted to go a step further to the extent that we can when we have funds available. So it took months and months and months to create a website. I have a daughter-in-law who is magnificent. She had worked for American Cancer Society for many years. She has a science degree, and she has jumped in and has helped me since day one with creating social media posts, research. She's been fabulous in every way, and I can't thank her enough. But we had to start from scratch. We had nothing, and our source for everything was going to be government. We're going to use all of the government sites because they allow us to do that. We don't have to get their permission to do it. We can use the National Cancer Institute stuff. We can use the NIH sites. We can use CDC sites. We can do that. And just so it turns out, those are actually pretty good sources of information. So that's where we've based lots of our information on for anyone who's thinking about starting a foundation and wondering, where do you get your information? Because at this point, we had no board of directors. I had no one to ask questions of. My doctor had retired by this time, my oncologist. So, what are you going to do? We just started with creating something and starting to talk about My Faulty Gene. It took from January or February of 2020 until I believe November before we finally had our website online. And we started at that point. I believe that was when we also started social media. And social media has been one of our largest ways that we've been able to become known and be able to assist people. We do things in communities and continue that to this day, even more so than we used to. But social media has been the thing that helped us to pivot, honestly. I guess it's been now 2 years basically that we've been on social media, and we have about a little over 7,000 followers, I believe. We do a mix because we know that people don't want to just be preached at all day long, every day. We give inspirational posts every day as well as some kind of a medical post. We don't even just talk about hereditary cancers. We talk about other cancers that are not hereditary, because the numbers fluctuate. Some people will say between 5 and 15%. Some people will say between 8 and 10%. You see different numbers. But of all cancers, roughly around 10% of them are hereditary in nature, as far as what we know right now. So, and when I say hereditary, due to a genetic mutation, because there can be familial cancers that are not hereditary, but you might have been raised with the same carcinogens around you or the same diet and things that might put you in a familial cancer group instead of a hereditary one. I can tell you that after starting my foundation, it took a while, but I finally have all of my first degree relatives tested. And it was just this year that the last first degree relative agreed to test, because everyone didn't want to test. And it's kind of like me when I didn't want to test. I don't know if you're afraid of the knowledge, but what you should be afraid of is not having that knowledge if you do have a mutation, because so many cancers that are hereditary in nature can be stopped or slowed down if you have the correct information. That knowledge is a key thing. But back to my family, I now know that I have 8 family members with my mutation. I think about it. Had we not tested, and I say had my sister and I not tested, 2 of my children and 2 of her children would not know that they share our mutation. And, when the time comes, my grandchildren that need to be tested would not know that they need to be tested. One of my brothers, I'm one of 5 children. 3 of the 5 of us share the mutation. When my brother tested positive, he has 2 children. One of his is tested, one is not. His daughter is a pediatric oncology nurse at MD Anderson, and she certainly understood the importance of genetic testing. So she did that, and she also shares the mutation. And at age 27, she had her prophylactic risk-reducing mastectomy, and just had her first child. And once she's through with having children, then she will also have a bilateral salpingo oophorectomy and get rid of the ovaries, or the fallopian tubes. They're kind of doing some different research on that right now. But anyway, all of that to say, it has been life-changing for my family. Knowing is key. Knowing that you have the mutation is life-changing. Because of my knowledge that I have this mutation, I'm at risk of pancreatic cancer. It's not a high risk for a BRCA1 mutation person with that mutation, but it is a risk. And the fact that I have a family member that has had it, that puts me at an increased risk. I have to tell a story because there's lots of doctors in the gastro field that are not up to speed on genetic testing, unfortunately. Some of them are old school and they're just not, they weren't trained. And it's going to take a while to have a flip where more and more doctors are coming in and are being trained on the importance of genetic testing. But even there are people who are there. And I'm not trying to pick on them, but my own GI did not see the importance of me having screening of my pancreas. It's what I was going to try to lead to. He just didn't see the need for it. And I said, okay, then I'm going to go to another doctor. And at that point, he said, okay, we'll do it. You have to advocate for yourself, right? Mm. So I went forward, had screening, and my pancreas was fine on that first screen, but I did learn that I had something called Barrett's esophagus, which is a precancerous condition. Had we not done my screening then, I wouldn't know it. And again, this same GI, it's like, oh, we'll look at that every 4 years or so. My oncologist said, no, we'll look at it every year. That's a precancerous condition. So knowledge is an important thing because esophageal cancer is another one that it's not easy to detect. You usually don't detect it very early. So anyway, knowing is important, and it has changed the trajectory of my healthcare. And just recently, because I understand the importance of studies, I just recently was enrolled in the PRECEDE consortium study that is going on at different hospitals across the country. And it's a pancreatic cancer screening program. And I'm taking part in through the UT Southwestern in Dallas. It's where I'm having my screening done for that. So, but I wouldn't be doing that if it were not for my knowledge. And I'm going to kind of back up a little bit because I'm talking about that, and it's kind of important. The fact that in providing tests, which I'll talk about a little bit more shortly, but in providing tests to funding for tests for people, we can see what kind of a difference we're making. We can quantify how we're helping others. We can see we spend this much money or we provide this many tests and we've helped this many people. And we've provided hundreds of tests at this point. But you never really know about your educational efforts. And I know, Erica, I know you know this. You don't, what kind of an impact are we having through our education? So I want to share a quick story about someone who reached out to us through social media. She had learned the day before, and this was maybe 4 or 5 months ago. I don't have my dates down, but sometime in the last 6 months. And she had learned that she had a BRCA2 mutation and gone to her doctor. He had shared that with her, and he told her that as a result of having that mutation, she was at increased risk of breast and ovarian cancer. But he didn't talk about any of the others. He didn't talk about melanoma. He didn't talk about pancreatic cancer. Didn't talk about family members men who could also be at risk of breast cancer and prostate cancer, that it wasn't just breast and ovarian cancer that a BRCA mutation had, put you at risk for. Anyway, so she said as soon as she got home, she decided she was going to get on social media and see what she could find out. And she somehow found us because through social media, and she put BRCA in and she found us. So she said she started looking through our posts, and for 8 hours, she read our posts. We've got several thousand posts. She said for 8 hours, she read our posts. And she said, I have a question for you. She said, I saw on there something my doctor did not mention, and that was pancreatic cancer. She said, can you tell me about my risk? I said, no, I'm not a medical professional. I can tell you, I'm a patient advocate, and I can tell you what I would do if it was me, but I'm not. You need to, talk to your physician about that. But again, she said, well, here's the deal. She said, I had a CT scan a few months ago, and there was a shadow on my pancreas. They weren't looking at my pancreas. She said, I asked the doctor about it. He said it was nothing he was worried about. She said, so I just believed him. She said, is that something I should worry about? I said, well, I'm not going to tell you to worry, but I'm going to tell you what I would do if it were me. I would go to a place where a teaching hospital where there is someone who deals in pancreatic cancer every day. That's all they do. Not someone in a smaller town or smaller facility where they're only seeing pancreatic cancer maybe, once every 3 weeks or whatever. You need somebody who this is their specialty, and go and let them do a workup on you or look at your test results or whatever and go from there. I said, if I were you, that's what I would do. And that's all I can tell you. That's what my advice would be. And she followed up on my advice, and she scheduled an appointment and had an appointment at a teaching hospital a few weeks later, and learned that she had early pancreatic cancer, and she had Whipple surgery, and she's doing fine. And so this is one of those times where I can't quantify how education, what impact we have in educating others, but there is an example of education being very impactful and saving someone's life. Anybody have a question on that?
I just want to thank you for all these stories. I mean, because it's education counts. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is we can advocate with this knowledge, and we can help ourselves. I'd like to just not change the subject, but enlarge the subject a bit, because you and I know that we've been talking about universal genetic testing. Not only patients or people who may suspect that they may have a genetic or hereditary disposition to any sort of cancer, but recently you and I went through an experience of my understanding, I guess, that I needed to be tested for my own genetic makeup to see if there was something that predisposed me to getting colorectal cancer. Colon cancer is what I had, for the fact that I have children and they have children. And plus, it's interesting. It's powerful
to
have knowledge about oneself. So what you and I discovered in this conversation and over the course of these months is that not enough people are getting their genetic testing done, period. Not only former patients, surviving patients, not only people who are actively in the therapeutic setting, but we want everybody to be tested. That's a goal for universality, correct? You and I are in sync on that one. We know it's literally impossible to say that we'll get it done, but we want to try and put it out there that everybody needs to be tested. And we would like to together support all of that in any way that we can.
Yes. I mean, the problem is, obviously, you've got insurance to deal with. You've got, it's hard to get approval. One of the things that we work on is getting insurance approvals when people are denied. And it shouldn't be so hard. How hard, it's going to be much more costly for an insurance company if someone is diagnosed with a cancer that they could have prevented. It's going to be way more costly for them. So that doesn't even make sense. But all the people that can benefit from that knowledge, yes, absolutely. I know that, Erica, what we were talking about, because you see with Lynch syndrome being the one that we hear so much about with colorectal cancer patients, that's their primary, there's 5 different Lynch mutations. And if you have one of those, then it puts you at risk of not only colon cancer, but other cancers. And so that was not only for your children, but are you at risk of these other cancers as well? So, but with Lynch syndrome, it is in the United States, 1 in 279 people have Lynch syndrome. That's quite a few. But do you know that only 5% of those 279 know it? That is not acceptable. People are walking around without having any idea that they have this mutation that's putting them at high risk for cancer. Different cancers, uterine cancer, melanoma, there's even bladder cancer. There's other cancers associated with the various Lynch mutations. So it's very important. I saw an article on one of the medical journals that I get daily updates, and I saw it last week, and I couldn't not comment on it on LinkedIn because it was a doctor from Yale University, and she was talking about the fact that we're getting so many more people with that are surviving their cancer that there's not going to be enough oncologists to take care of them, and so we're going to need to segue away from treatment by oncologists to the primary care physician. And I understand that, and the numbers she gave were compelling. But had I been moved away before 9 years after my breast cancer diagnosis, I would be dead. Because it took me that long to agree to genetic testing. Doctors aren't offering it, whatever reason. It's something that needs to be done. So my suggestion was that, and I asked for input, and I think pretty much everyone agreed, but was that if you're going to have to segue people away from their oncologist at some point, in the very least, they need to have genetic testing. It comes back again to universal. Doesn't matter if you have a family history. If you've had cancer, for sure, you need to be tested.
Doesn't it seem like even people with going into their general practitioners where these GPs know that people have like big familial histories of cancer and things, that they should be doing genetic testing on people? I mean, and I was so naive to cancer prior to my diagnosis. We don't have a big family history. In fact, I'm pretty much the first one, maybe, with cancer, but with like my brother-in-law has a big family history. And now, people are coming into my life where, now that, because I'm such a big advocate, where they're like, oh, well, I have a huge family history of cancer. And I'm like, well, have you ever had genetic testing? And they're like, what's genetic testing? And
right.
It's like, have you never talked to your doctor about getting genetic testing? And they're like, I don't even know how I would go about doing that. And I don't, it's like, talk to your doctor about having genetic testing done and, find out what's in your DNA, find out what, is in your genes, and find out what's going on, but it seems like that should almost be like a standard of care at this point with GPs. But it's not, and it's difficult. Now there are programs out there like Cancer IQ is a fabulous program where they're going into GP offices, they're going into urologist offices, into all of these offices, and they have a computer program where the family health history is entered, and it'll spit out a thing saying this person needs to be tested. Programs like that are very useful, and they're going to be more and more widespread use of those in coming days, I'm sure. But
I mean, you're always going to have patients like me who are going to say no, but
Oh yeah.
but if you approach it using a genetic counselor, send that patient to a genetic counselor. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, you may not be the expert on that, and recognize that. Send that patient to someone who is an expert.
Right.
And that's something that's not done enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know so many stories of people who did not get testing. I could spend a long time telling really compelling stories about the importance of genetic testing. I'm going to tell you one. Why not?
Okay. Please.
We did a social media program where we said, if you have a family member that has a known mutation and you've never tested to see if you share it, we'll test you for free. Just contact us. And we did that. And this woman contacted us and said, my daughter has a BRCA2 mutation, and I'd like to know if it came through me. She said, I've never had cancer, but I'd like to know if it came through me. We did her testing, and in fact, she did have it, but she also had an APC mutation. And this is kind of something that's interesting. Lots of times, if someone has a family member that have a testing and they learn they have a mutation, in a long time ago, people would just do the testing of that one gene to see if they share that one gene. That's called single gene testing or single site testing. But we do not do that. We didn't want to just know that. There's no difference in cost, whether you do one gene or if you do a whole panel of genes. So let's do the whole panel. You've got another side of the family. You've got, this person could have not inherited from the same mother, something that mother also had, whatever. So anyway, we tested her. She had 2 different genes. So she had twin sons. One of the twins said, I'd like to know if I share either of those 2 mutations. We tested him. He had the BRCA2 mutation. He had the APC mutation, and he had a BRCA1 mutation. Well, he didn't get it from his mother, so we tested Dad, and sure enough, Dad had the BRCA1 mutation. So had we done single gene testing, they would have only known about that one gene and wouldn't have known about the risk, the way additional risk that they had. But the other twin we tested him, and he shared all 3 as well. So very important if you do have testing, and if someone in your family does have a mutation identified, don't just test for that one mutation, test for do a whole panel. Mm-hmm. So, but what we do is, you can go to our website. It's called myfaultygene.org. You can go there, and under the resources section, we have an area where there are 2 things you would need to fill out if you're wanting our assistance with genetic testing. One of them is application for assistance, and the other is risk assessment. And they're very simple forms. We're not asking financial information. We don't ask if you're a legal citizen. We're not asking any of that kind of stuff. We don't want to know. We want to just have some opening information from you so we can call you and talk to you. If you do end up having insurance and you haven't been able to get it approved, we have different companies that we can go through, and sometimes they can still get that approved. And if not, we'll use patient-initiated testing. If you can't get it approved because your doctors can't get it approved because it's not meeting NCCN guidelines, and that's a big issue. And Erica, you were talking about, the universal testing. I mean, getting that approved from insurance company is going to be a major, major task. Mm-hmm. It's huge. So, but if you need testing, we want to find a way to get you to have that testing.
That's what Kathy does with My Faulty Gene. She helps people who need the help in getting tested. And this is really an important offering to the entire community. And for that, we're so grateful to you, Kathy, for your dedication and your passion for this.
The way I see it, this is my pay it forward for sure. If it were not for genetic testing, I'd be dead. There's no doubt. I wouldn't have met grandchildren. I wouldn't be having my 40th anniversary with my husband next month. My life was saved and it's changed because of genetic testing. So how can I be quiet about it? I can't. I get on an airplane. I have people that call me a genetic testing evangelist, because I can't shut up. I'm always talking about it. I was on a flight a couple of weeks ago going to a conference, and I decided I had not had sleep and I needed sleep. And so I was absolutely not going to talk about genetic testing on this flight. So I get in the corner next to the window and I put my head and I'm like, I'm going to sleep. And I did. The flight is over. We've come to getting ready to exit. And it's my first time to talk to the person next to me. And she asked, what are you doing on the trip? Is this anyway, it was my segue to go ahead and mention why I was there and the importance of genetic testing. And family history of cancer, wanted all this information. So by the time we get off the plane, she's already ready, to sign up and get genetic testing. And then she walks away with all the information I'd given her. And this man comes up behind me. He said, I hope you don't mind. I've been listening. Can I talk to you for a few minutes? And that's the kind of stuff that happens all the time. So it doesn't matter if I'm at a ball game, I'm at the store or whatever, because everywhere we know someone's affected by cancer. That's the reality of it. And if there's any chance that it's hereditary, which about a 10% chance that it's hereditary, you want to know. You need to know, because it can save your life.
Kathy, that is just magnificent.
Mm-hmm.
We applaud you and thank you for your passion, and we support you. And I want you to know that if there's anything that we can do to support you and your work, we're there for you. We're in your corner. And I'm just blown away about how much work we all need to do together in order to bring into fruition the knowledge, the empowerment, the patient empowerment, for really confronting these diseases in the way that we know we can and we eventually will. It's people like you that make such an impact on the rest of the community. And thank you for all of your work. And we're thrilled and delighted to have you here today.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah. Now before we sign off, does anybody have any quick questions for Kathy? Antoinette?
Yeah.
Good to see you, Kathy.
It's
Hello.
great to see you too. It's great to see you. Yeah. I just appreciate the opportunity always to be chatty Kathy and to talk. So, I'm sorry I talked so much about, I probably talked more about things that I shouldn't have, but it's just, the whole thing is that we can make a difference. And that's what we do as patient advocates. And we are impacting lives. And it's not easy. I can't tell you that this is easy, because I continue to work full time because I have to have some way of funding this. This is not being funded by anyone. We are not getting support that we should, but that's not my area of expertise to try to go out and find that funding or to write grants. Every time I write one, it gets turned down. And I'm hoping that, as time has gone on and we get more and more support, again, I couldn't, I've now got a fabulous advisory board of doctors from across the country. I never would have been able to pull those doctors in of this caliber had it not been, and genetic counselors and patient advocates. It's not, it's not just the doctors, but I never would have pulled those people in had we not gone ahead and gone forward with self-funding and getting this established so that they would know it was something worth supporting. So I'm hopeful that will, in the new year, with the budgets from all the different pharmaceutical companies and genetic testing companies, I'm hoping that we can make some progress there so that we can make a bigger impact that we need to make.
Well, I predict you will. And I'm so looking forward to seeing you in the new year at the conferences. And please let us know any way that we can be of support and service to you and the mission that you have so beautifully engaged. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Kathy.
And, and thanks in particular to our two sponsors, the Seagen company and Mirati Therapeutics, who have kindly given us a little bit of support for this pivoting program. And we hope to continue to do the pivoting programs into the new year as well, because we all need to know one another, and this is the way we do it. So here's to you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank
So
you.
much. Yeah.
Y'all have a great weekend.
You too.
Yeah.
Kathy. Thanks.
Kathy.
Bye.
Yeah. See everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.